Is Tuesday, November the 28th, which is lunch at Ancillary Cafe, 131 Burgundy Street, Heidelberg at 12:30 p.m. For your parking is at Leo's Supermarket and a walk through to the cafe. I think most people know. If your name is not on the list and want to go, it's up there today. Please put it on so they can ring up and make it how many's coming, because they do not want to know what's going on. Okay, Wednesday the 6th of December, we're joining Rosanna Ladies for Christmas lunch at Bolera Receptions at 1435 Main Road, Eltham. The time is after 11:30 for 12:30 lunch. Okay, the cost is $50. Quite a few that have given the money in today. There's maybe one or two that haven't, and I think some of the people have paid by bank payment, which I think I've mentioned in the last newsletter, using your name as a sender reference, so forth. And that's to be paid as soon as possible because they have to pay this, very, very quickly. Okay.
Who'll give the money to, Gary?
Yeah, you can give it to me today if you've got it. If you've got the $50, you give it to me and I'll hand it on to Rosanna Ladies, okay? Because they're actually running it. I'm not running it. I'm only helping them out. And we're helping them out by joining them. Okay. I'm talking about January now in 2024. I've booked the room at Springthorpe Village for the President's Barbecue at 12 p.m. What will you need to bring with you on the day is a dinner plate, knife, fork and a glass, and a little light refreshment, if you so desire to have one. All else will be supplied on the day. The cost is $15 per person. Please start putting your names on the list up there on the counter. And the money is to be paid in the December meeting. That'll be in the newsletter. Okay? Wednesday, February.
What date was that?
It is January the 23rd.
Thank you.
Wednesday, February the 28th, 2024. We're joining other clubs for a combined bus trip going to Elwyn Gardens in Yarra Glen for a tour of the gardens, after to the Grand Hotel for lunch. The cost for the bus is $40 per person. There'll be more information later, but you'll be paying for your own morning tea and lunch wherever we stop. And I'll have all the next lot of information at the next meeting, okay? Also, please don't forget to put your names and numbers on the list of lunch for next month. Thank you. This being 3 days after Remembrance Day, which we usually do the month before, which we didn't do, for our fallen comrades, I would like to leave you with this. It's called The Best on Earth. If someone has done military service, they earn the title veteran and more. They earn their deep respect and administration. They are special to one can ignore. They sacrifice the comforts we enjoy. The list is long for all the things they've given. Our veterans are extraordinary people. They're loyal, dedicated, true and brave. Their terror and vision were real treats. They showered us with what could handle any storm. We own our freedoms and our very lives to our veterans who served in uniform. Our veterans should be celebrated. Their externalization on other group companies. We're grateful for the many things they've done. They're always in our hearts and in our prayers. We're our veterans' support and friendship. Let no one ever question what they're worth. These men and women served us and our country, our veterans, and the best on earth. That was written by Joanna Fuchs, and it was taken from some of the stuff that I've done before. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I could leave you with an ode for the veterans. They shall not grow old as we are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Thanks, gentlemen. Don't forget to put your names down for next month, okay? Thank you.
The consequence of not being able to get on first, I had to check it if it was working. Check it.
Thanks, guys. Okay, we get to a segment now, Members' Corner, but I've just noticed that one of our about to be newest members has arrived, Philip Carter. So, good morning, Philip.
Good morning, how are you?
I'm good. If you'd like to come up,
Yeah, sure.
that'd be great.
Sorry I'm late.
No, the main thing is that you're here.
This side or that side?
Yeah, just here. Great to see you. Thanks for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Philip Carter. Philip has been proposed, I think Robert Burbacker proposed him as a potential new member, and it's my great pleasure today to induct him into the club. I understand in your former vocation you're a public servant?
Correct.
Yeah? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was the last job that I had. So in the recession that we had to have,
Yeah.
you might remember that,
Yeah.
I wasn't working for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to hear you, monsieur. We'll give it
All right. Well, you'll do what you need to do.
I've done that.
That's all right. I'll grab those. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, just avoided standing on it, would have been a good thing to do. Take
All right. What else do you know?
This is one of the hazards of this new gadget, so we're just sitting and hanging, but you can hang on to that.
Oh, yeah.
You're probably familiar with these sorts of things. You stick this here. How's that? Yeah, I'll just increase the sound a bit.
how's that, guys? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we'll just make it a bit louder. Let's just try again.
How's that, guys? Can you hear me?
No.
Right.
How's that, guys? No, they're
It's
not.
not working. Just keep going.
Okay, so the last job that I had, the 1990s, I didn't work for a couple of years, and then John Howard came in. I got started to work with the Department of Defence, and at that stage I remember. Anyway, no, I'm starting to tell a story. But
That's all right.
I worked from there for 1996. I worked from 1996 to 2012 or 13, and then I retired. I spoke with, as you guys may have done yourselves, I spoke to blokes I played cricket with and football with, and I had a figure in my mind of what I wanted to do, that I wanted to retire on, and I got to that. When I had a final interview, the last day I was working, the bloke from the New South Wales government super scheme said to me, if you think you've got enough, when you turn 65 you'll have $14,500 more. And I said, well, how can that happen? And I hadn't factored any money in from, the pension at all. And he said, no, well, you're entitled to that when you turn 65. So there you go. I'm now okay financially. But I worked with Defence for a little while on, originally when the ASLAV, the light armoured vehicle, came in, just to put the parts up on that, and I used to do a thing called the repair parts scale. The last 6 years I was with Defence, I worked in scheduling projects. The Defence decided in its wisdom they should do something concrete about getting preventing the projects running over time and over budget.
Yep.
And they never had a schedule
Right.
prior to that. I mean, they all did their own thing.
Yes.
They decided to mandate an official schedule, and that was what I did. And we did okay.
Fantastic. I understand that your alma mater might have been the alma mater of some of the other members here today. Old Parliament.
Yes,
Is that right?
Yep.
David Jones and Andy Walsh and Kevin Ryan.
Yes, it was Andy that told me of the existence of this club and that it was a thing to be part of.
Yeah.
And so I followed him up.
Fantastic. Well done, Andy. So in your leisure time now, I understand you're a bit of a photographer. You like to travel.
I love,
And
both
love
those
it,
things,
yeah. And you're also a keen historian.
Yeah, look, it's when I first finished work, I did wanted to get a little bit further, well, start really on the family tree.
Yep.
We hadn't done much on that, and I got stuck into that. Like all things, it's not easy, but you rely on. I found Ancestry really good because you can also benefit not only from your own efforts, but when you click on a certain bloke's name, you'll have the efforts of all the people around him on that.
Yep.
And you can take advantage of that, which was really good.
Yeah, it's a collective thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, look, we'll get on with it. The formal aspect of this, Philip, the Probus clubs throughout Australia and New Zealand provide the opportunity for senior members of our community to join together in friendship, fellowship, and fun. And I invite you to become a member of our community and to participate in the activities of our club. I now have great pleasure in inducting you into our club, the Probus Club of Heidelberg. And in time, I spoke with Robert this morning, in time you will be presented with your Probus badge and also your name badge. But all right, there's a bit like the vows of marriage. Once I've made the declaration, you're in, brother. So welcome, please.
Thank you.
Please make Philip welcome. You can be relieved of all that and take a seat.
Don't fall to your death.
No. That's it. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Philip. All right, now we've come to that stage of the proceedings. Pardon me. Dr. Peter Bedford, I think, is our Members' Corners man this morning. So, Peter, can I invite you to come up and give us your presentation, please? Thank you.
We'll try again with the gadget.
Yeah.
We'll try again. We'll give it another try.
That's for young Will. That's for Will, if you would, Pete. That'd be great. Sorry. Yes. Probably at the end of the meeting, because logistically we need to get some places.
Good idea.
All right.
Okay. Put this here. Okay, just give us a couple of moments, please. We'll try again.
No, you're right.
They're on the ground, I think.
Yeah, well,
John, have you got Phil's glasses? Have you got Phil's glasses?
Phil's
Glasses, they drop on the ground.
Took them off to put the other ones.
your glasses.
Yeah. Okay.
Just a second. Get rid of this.
There's an old pen. Where do we put them? Don't stand on them.
No, it's right. I don't want to move.
Oh, there they are. Down there. So,
Good thinking.
sorry.
There are little conspiracies in this.
I see. Thanks.
Lucky.
I didn't want to move.
No, that's a very good idea. We'll try this again. Let's see if this one- if it doesn't work.
Take one.
You know it works now. We'll blame the abuses of the previous president for that. Yeah. Yes, this is all part of the experience. How's he sound?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We might be right to go.
Yeah, you're right, mate. Just keep on.
You just tell me when I'm ready to come.
You're right.
Okay. Morning, gentlemen and ladies. I've been asked by Colin to give the club a bit of a rundown. How long is this going to go for, by the way?
It's up to you. 15 minutes.
That'll do, 15. A rundown on the school dental services of Queensland, for whom I worked for a 2-year period, 68, 69. And it was quite an eye-opener to me. I'm probably the only Queenslander in the room, and I'm probably the only, Robert, I'm certainly probably the only dentist sitting here now. So if I say a lot of twaddle, most of you won't know what I'm talking about anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I was born in Brisbane, and I went to school at a little school called Barton, and then I went on to Milton, and then on to Brisbane Grammar, and matriculated, went off to university, where I received a state government fellowship. Now, at the time, the Commonwealth government had a lot of Commonwealth scholarships, and probably a lot of you benefited from those. And I won one of those, but my dad said to me, well, you've applied for the fellowship, and the reason you must take it is because it pays £3.10 a week, right? Plus all my tuition and all my school fee and my university fees and books and instruments, materials, etc., the whole lot. And at that time, and I think still is, dentistry is the most expensive course to do at university because of all the paraphernalia that it entails. And I entered the university, and I was the last of the 4-year lot. The year after I started, all the universities around Australia, I think, gradually became 5-year courses, and they're still 5-year courses, and I don't think they'll be any different, that's it, they went to 5. But I was a 4-year course, so I graduated in December 1964, and the first 2 years I was working for the government, because they tell you where to go, they just appoint you to a clinic around the state, because the state government health department had 2 forms of dental treatment, which were basically free, and they were clinics and the school dental service. Now, I never knew this until I started doing a bit of research, that the school dental service has been running since 1911, and it finished in 1972, and I finished in 69, so I wouldn't have had much longer to go if I'd stayed there. But it's a very good service. It's basically free. Certainly the school part of it is free. And what I used to do once I got on the road, I'd write to the locals, because there was no internet, no mobile cell phones, no nothing in those days. You'd write to the local principal and you'd ask him to send out the forms to all the parents, and they'd reply yes or no, we want to have our child treated by the school dentist. And then you had a pile of kids, and and you were already allocated an area from the, and this allocation usually took place at the beginning of each year. It could change if you applied for another area or if the government wanted you to go to another area. And I always remember my first mentor was a fellow called Claude Klabakowski, and he was an Ipswich boy, my dad being an Ipswich boy. He knew the family, and Claude was a character, and he'd march into the health department in George Street in Brisbane and say, which one of you lucky fellows is coming on holidays with me this year? Because let me tell you, in those days, school dentists got school holidays. If the school was on holidays, as per the normal school year, you had a holiday, and it was a paid holiday too. And which, was pretty good. I mean, just after I finished with school dentistry, they said, no, you'll get your 3 or 4 weeks a year, whatever it was then. And the rest of the time, you'll go to a government clinic and you'll work in there. And a lot of, and the first year I was out, I wasn't in school health. I was up in Mackay, and I'd been sent up there to work with a dentist called Russ Brown, and Russ was a fantastic dentist. I learned an awful lot from him. But it was extremely hard work. We used to do 25 units of dentures a week. That's partial dentures, full uppers and full lowers, plus all the extractions and fillings and exams and cleans and everything else. We had 2 technicians. They worked flat out all the time. We had 1 nurse who used to run between 2 surgeries, and we had a girl out in the office who used to do all the bookwork. And then the following year, they sent me up to Charles Towers, where the clinic there, I was the only dentist, I had a nurse and a technician, was attached to the hospital. So they varied. Sometimes the clinics were separate entities, sometimes they were attached to hospitals. And then I decided that, I wanted to try school dentistry. And I'm not sure whether it was the holidays or whether it was just the fact that I could perhaps get a bit closer back to Brisbane, because I had a lot of family there and friends. And so I applied for the school dental service. And so Claude and I, off we went to Mount Tamborine, and place called Ravenswood, and we would go around these various schools and come 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we just packed up and Claude and I went off and played golf at the local Mount Tambourine, golf course. And he would visit the local farmers and he'd get a dozen eggs here and a couple of pounds of butter there and all the rest of it, But he had it all worked out. But I was taking the place, and it was called the Gympie Run, and I never actually lived near Gympie, although my area was centred south of Gympie, between there and about Malulaba, thereabouts, and back to the hinterland over the Dividing Range. So it was quite a big area, and I reckon there were probably 24 schools in the entire area. And a lot of them were beautiful, beautiful one-teacher schools with incredibly dedicated teachers who taught anything from, say, 12 kids up to 20. And then they'd have another teacher if there was more than that, and the kids would... if there were the more teachers they had, the more students, the more teachers they get. But as far as the equipment was concerned, I was by myself. I had an E.H. Holden wagon, and I had a English Bulldoze compressor, which was very, very good. You just plugged it in, no way she went. I had high-speed drill, low-speed drill. I had a nice little padded chrome-plated chair, which I just could fold up and put together. I had a boiler, no autoclaves, so there was no, the sterilisation was pretty basic. And I would arrive at the school, and the teacher headmaster or mistress would give me a list of all the kids. I'd work out what I had to do, and I would set up in the local tea room or out on the veranda or in the library, and without giving me, it was some of the places were pretty interesting. I remember once at Coolum, I set up on the veranda there, and I just left everything overnight. It was all locked up. I came back the next morning, everything was covered in bird droppings. The birds had been nesting in the rafters overnight, but I didn't realise that, and of course, that held things up for a little while. But it was extremely interesting. I had no nurse, so you had to do everything yourself. And the things that were you could do was, you did examinations and scales and cleans, basic fillings, amalgams and silicates, the white ones as they were in those days, they're not composites now. And you'd do simple extractions and referrals if the child needed orthodontics or something. They were off to the local orthodontist in town. And if they wanted to do it, and it was quite good, and I was getting around the schools fairly well because as a new graduate, or fairly new graduate, you were pretty keen and you enjoyed your job, and I got a letter once from the department. I don't know who sent it to me, and I've long since lost it, but I was actually asked to slow down. And I think because I was getting around the schools too quickly, but I thought that was a plus rather than a negative situation. And I've never forgotten that, but I have a funny feeling that my predecessor, who was near retirement age, was on a bit of a sinecure, and he was taking his time and just going around the schools and having fun with the teachers and the headmaster and so on and so forth. But anyway, that didn't really matter. I slowed down slightly and away we went, and I never heard any more about it. But I thought that is the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. Normally they want you to do more work, not less. But the schools themselves were absolutely in some of the most beautiful areas in the hinterland of that whole area. And the area extended, as I say, from Gympie down to about Malulaba, with these 24 schools. At one stage I actually, I dropped out. Yeah. Is that this thing here?
Yes, it's probably the wires disconnected.
It's probably this thing just...
Could be you, mate. You're doing okay.
Yeah, fine. Is that
probably not it. Yeah, just a second. Let's see, there's this thing here. And let's see, it has to plug into there, then that. And if you don't know what to do, you go back to something a noble bloke to do. So I'm sorry that I'm so primitive, but we'll address this issue. It's just a connection somehow or another. You can blame me entirely.
Yeah.
But we'll give you something that works. revert back, speaking to the top of the microphone.
Top of the mic.
Because it's directional.
I'll turn this up.
Is that okay?
How's that?
Can people hear me now? Yep.
Hold it up a bit closer.
A bit closer?
Yeah,
That's
keep
better.
doing that. Yep.
Yeah, right, good. And so, we'd have all sorts of funny things happen in one of these schools, and I remember one day I was out at Blythe, which is, that's it, like that? That better?
Keep
Like
going.
that.
Yeah, that's it. That's what's
And Blythe is a sort of cane-growing small town between Nambour and the coast. And I knew one of the teachers there because she happened to be the girlfriend of the guy I used to flat with. So, but one day, a car drove very quickly past the school, and this paper bag full of what turned out to be oranges was thrown out of the car. And these little kids went dancing after them. And I was talking to Trish at lunchtime, and I said, what's all that about? And she said, that's the so-and-so family. She said, they're an Aboriginal family, and that's all they'll get for lunch. So the kids were scrambling for their lunch, right, which was an orange, right? And she said, oh, next week they've got to go down to Grafton because they've got to go to court. And I said, what are they doing down there in court? She said, because one of them stole a car and they've got it front up. And I said, well, how are they going to get there? And she said, they'll probably steal another car. Which, I'm sorry about that, really. But that was the way things were in those days, and things were very, very primitive. So you came across a lot of things like that. And another situation, I think the most interesting situation I struck was up at a place called Koondoo. Now, Koondoo is an isolated little hamlet north of Kin, Pomona. And it was probably the most northerly school that I went to. And I got there, and there were about 14 or 15 kids in the school to actually treat. And I was slowly going through the kids doing the treatment. And I said to the headmaster at one stage, I said, we were having lunch together, and I said, these Smith kids, I said, I can't get a peep out of them. What's going on here? He said, I can't get them to talk to me, and answer a simple question. Does that hurt, or, open please, or what, Anyway, he said, oh, that's those Smith kids. He said, I'll tell you the story. He said, their father, he said, came back from the war, and he's never left the property since. He obviously had post-traumatic stress disorder, which they didn't call it that in those days. People used to call things shell shock and that sort of stuff. Anyway, he said the only time he ever leaves the property is to vote, and he comes on horseback because the school is a voting polling station. And I said, he said his wife goes into town in the ute and she picks up supplies about once every couple of weeks, but he never leaves the property. And I said, how does this relate to the kids? He said, because they never spoke to their children. He said, when they came to the school, they could barely speak. He said, I virtually had to teach them to talk. So, that's how isolated some of those places can get up there. It's a bit like Deliverance, if you've ever seen the movie, you can understand what some of these hillbilly type places are like. And then his final thing to me that lunch hour, I remember, he said, by the way, Peter, he said, can you stay a few more days? I said, well, I'm nearly finished, that I really should move on. I said, why do you want me to stay? He said, because my wife's off in Brisbane having our first baby, and I'm going stir crazy up here, I need someone to talk to. So this is the sort of thing you used to get, and it was just, it was really an eye-opener to me. And I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed the 2 years I had, and as you see, I finished in '69. By that time, Judy and I were married, and we were heading off overseas, so I'd done 4 years for the public service, and then we went and hopped on the Orchids, and off we went to England, where I spent the next 4 years. But I had to pay my way back out of my last year, and I used to send and post a cheque every month to the government. These days you do it by bank transfer, and then I didn't realise, I never realised I was starting to investigate this, that we actually closed the whole service in 1972, and all the kids who used to attend those beautiful schools with those dedicated teachers, they all bussed into big places like Nambour, Regentville, and Little Bar, and those schools were shut down. I don't know what happened to the buildings, they probably transferred somewhere else.
And the clinic service basically took over, and so there was just no more school dental service, and that was the end of it. And basically, that's and then my career took a different turn, of course, when I came back from overseas after 4 years studying and working over there. So I hope you enjoy that, guys.
Just a minute. Are there any questions that anybody would like to ask? Peter, we've got a bit of time.
There used to be a school dental service in Victoria, wasn't there?
I have no idea about the Victorian or any other state like this. I only know about Queensland because it's the only one I ever worked for, so I really don't know. I did discover that the chap who started the school dental service in Queensland way back then in about 1911, he became the sort of dental guru for Queensland in the days before they even had proper dental degrees. You know, I think the bachelor's degree started in the 20s, but he'd been in Tasmania, working in Tasmania, and where they had a school dental service, because Tasmania has no dental school. It's the only state that doesn't. And they used to pinch their dentists from all the other states. And he learned that this thing worked quite well in Tasmania, and he started that up in Queensland. That's how it got going.
Yeah. Anyone? John, that guy.
Yeah, John.
Peter, I understand they had school dentist trains.
Yes, they did.
In Queensland.
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about those?
Yeah, they basically, the one that I never went on them, I never worked on those, but they were basically, the one I knew about was the one that went from Rockhampton out to Longreach. And in the early days, they didn't have clinics set up in the train. They had a vehicle, which they'd open up the back of the train, the vehicle would back out, and then off it would go around the various schools in the area. But I guess in a place like Longreach, what they'd do is the kids would come into the train rather than then later on would go out in this vehicle. But I couldn't have done that. I had to have a vehicle to get around to the various schools that I had to go to. But I heard a story where one of the enterprising dentists, there was a school dental guy on the train. He filled one of the carriages up with booze, you know, and beer, which he bought. Mind you, you wouldn't buy that Max beer from my camper, must be the best one, that's right. And he'd take it all out to Longreach and sell it for a considerable profit when he got there. But he got in a bit of trouble for that. But I don't even remember his name now, I can't remember. But as far as the trains go, I'm not sure whether that was the only one or whether there were others, I'm not sure. They did have a flying dental service out of Cairns, which used to go up and down the Cape. You go to places like Arakoon and Weeper and all that sort of thing. And that serves a lot of the Aboriginal communities up and down the Cape as well. Yes.
Did you have the treadle machines too?
No. Fortunately for me, the pedal machines went out the year I started my dental course. So, yeah, you'll remember. People who've been treated with them will remember them. They were like awful. But no, I had a high-speed drill. So, you know, the dentistry itself was, you know, you could do some quite good work because you had your high-speed drill, you had your little padded chair, and you had your compressor, and all the rest of it. And I think, on the whole, considering it was entirely free for those families that wanted that done, I mean, a lot of families didn't because they attended a private dentist in the area. The clinics were for free too, provided that, but I think they may have been means tested. I never had anything to do with the office work in the clinic. The clinics, that was all down to the staff of the clerical staff. But I do remember we used to make a lot of dentures in Mackay, and we got a lot of people who wanted to have inlays in their teeth, in their dentures. So, and they were all gold, and they had to pay for those. And they'd sometimes have 3 put in a bottom denture and 3 in a top denture. And that would cost them. They'd be prepared to pay for that because they thought it looked more natural because people had gold inlays in the teeth in those days. They'd have to pay for that.
Excellent presentation. Peter, I can see you zooming around in your EH, around the back streets of Corroy and Mundy and Mullaney and so forth, you would have had I can see you would have had a ball there. It's great. Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. It's been really informative. What we'll do now, we'll have a short break. Our guest speaker's here, and we'll invite our secretary to mic him up and get ready. So we'll just have a short break. I'm not sure where we're going. What I should tell you as well while we're having a break is after the meeting downstairs, hope everybody can stay for it, even just for a short while. There'll be a small presentation to our 100 years centenarian. We'll do it here, we'll do it here. All right, we'll be here. But, so I invite you to all stay for that if you can.
Well, you make it part of the lunch.
Give it to the speaker.
Have you guys always met here or?
That was just before mixed on lights. And then they started over social media and such.
Did you hear all that, Will? Did you hear all that okay?
Not a word. When you're on Thompson, when I was younger.
And there is one in Warringal. Women over.
Yeah.
So that will be down. There you go. Memory's fine, I don't know the memory. Well, I kicked off this in 1990. And then I went that way, so regional place in Czech Mangarata, Vanilla, and then I came back in 1995, I went to Coordinate. It was a broadie until well, I was. I had two stints. I was there until the end of 99 and I took over as a coordinator. I was there for a couple of years and being great.
There's always little grandmas that get in the system. Grandmas that get in the system.
Exactly. So you're better off software. So I go to like full time. 27 years.
Congratulations on 100. Congratulations on 100.
Yeah,
The mic's on.
What's happened to the lady?
Alan Thompson, I said I had a thought. You've seen the best and the worst in our audience. Which would you like to do? System first?
Well, I guess I got to try that. We'll see how it works.
I think I can go from there. Talk this way, Dave.
I've got enough work to
Where do you go? Now we're just testing the
Testing. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear him?
Can you hear me? Sounds like taking a good
Anyway.
Yeah.
You go for what it is. I'm not sure what's happening with them. I think they're getting mixed up. They don't seem to be working. I think these might be things are getting annoying. Sure. Oh, you did. Just push it.
Oh, well,
He's still living around. It's funny, I'm going to come back to this part. I've still got some, a few relatives, and friends live in the area. Mum and Dad, they died a long time ago. Sister, close to Warner Street, just off the cemetery. A few years ago.
That's the line. From here to here, for some reason, these ones aren't working. And I think it has to be this is it says there's an error because it's going too fast. You've said that before, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. I think it just slows down and then sends it later.
I used to see.
player was having to log on and verify who I was. I had to find a password because I was getting a bit stressed. I couldn't remember what it was. And then you send the codes and the phone was all over the phone was all over the system. I was doing this and sort of setting up the I had to get to the point where I could send the codes and I was sending them in a way I'd never seen before.
Okay, well, I think we might get started. Today I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Okay, thank you, David. Okay. I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Alan Thompson. The topic is the Australian Parliament and Parliament House Canberra. Alan's role was in charge of ancillary facilities. By way of background, Alan grew up in Rosanna. The family lived in Lower Plenty Road. I knew Alan in the 1990s when he was Secretary Department of Justice here in Victoria. And I'm sure he'd have many stories and experiences about this role too. But today we'll hear from Alan about the Australian Parliament and Parliament House Canberra. Please welcome Alan Thompson.
Can you hear me? No, not yet.
Can
you hear me now? Yep. Yes. Good, good. And look, just a little bit more background about me. Grew up in Rosanna. Can remember riding my bike over the hill to the Heidelberg Mall. This was the flashiest place in Melbourne, an off-road shopping centre. That was about 1957, I think. So it was just amazingly sophisticated to have this off the main road shopping centre. And I noticed it seems to have done that ever since. I trained as a civil engineer, Melbourne University and Imperial College in London. Worked as an engineer for about the next 15 years, designing hydro schemes for New Guinea and North Wales and so on. And then in the mid-80s, moved into government management roles, initially for the Vic government, and ran 3 departments in a row. It's called the Ministry of Housing and Construction, then the Conservation Department, and then finally the Justice Department here in Victoria. And then in late 90s moved to Canberra to head up an arm of the ACT government, really the city council functions for Canberra, because the ACT government's both a state government, if you like, a small state government and quite a large city council. And then about 7 years later, I went to New Zealand to run the Transport Ministry in Wellington, which was really very enjoyable. The only slight downside is because you're from Australia, they love talking about rugby. And okay, I'll take this one off there.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
Apologies.
Yes. So, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Right, good. Great on. Yeah. Look, I'll just pop this other one on the floor over here somewhere. Yeah, so off to New Zealand, a great job, but you had to keep on hearing about rugby and the triumph of the All Blacks over the Wallabies, or even any other team. It was all a bit painful. And then my final full-time role was at Parliament House in Canberra from 2008 for the next 4.5 years. And so that was the era of Prime Ministers Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard. For the whole of my time there, but I did, because of previous interactions, I've seen a lot of the Victorian Parliament, the ACT Assembly, the New Zealand Parliament, and then finally Parliament House Canberra. And I'll obviously make Parliament House Canberra the main focus of this chat. Also, fair to say, right now, Anne and I have returned from Canberra. We now live in Port Melbourne, and a fairly active member of the local Probus Club, Vice President. It's a very different meeting though. I'm sorry you blokes, down there it's 100 members, of whom 70% are women, and the us blokes are the other 30%. Don't ask me why, but that's the breakup down there. Okay, well look, for Parliament House, I'll talk a bit about the building, but hope to focus a lot more on how it works, because I think that's where there's a lot of moderately interesting history, but I think the bigger interest that people have is just how it works and the internal dynamics, some of which are terrific and some of which are not very wonderful at all. Now what I will do is just ask you just to, if you like, just pass this around. It happens to be a shot that it's a photo that yours truly took in 1998 from a helicopter. But if you were to fly around Canberra now, Parliament House from a distance would look the same. It's perched pretty well in the geographic centre of Canberra, and you might say therefore it would be the absolute life and soul of Canberra. And it's partly true, but a lot not true, because it is rather isolated from the rest of Canberra. And an awful lot of the people who work there, they fly in for their 22 weeks a year or 26 weeks or 30 weeks, and they fly out again. So a lot of Canberra's life goes on regardless of Parliament House, but other bits of Canberra and Canberra's economy hang off Parliament House. And it's a bit of it's more divorced from Canberra than you would expect. If you went right back to 1901, we became a federation, and for the next 27 years, Australia's Parliament operated through the Victorian Parliament House, and the Victorian Parliament was booted over to the exhibition building for that period. In 1927, once the site had been identified for national capital, Melbourne architect John Smith Murdoch had designed a provisional Parliament House, and it was opened by Duke of Gloucester. And just to remind you that he ultimately became King George VI, and his daughter, a young girl by the name of Elizabeth, was born 1 year before. So he and his wife came out, they opened Provisional Parliament House in 27, and that was only ever intended to be short term, but of course a few things got in the way, not least a World Depression and World War II. So nothing much more happened about a bigger, longer term Parliament until the 70s. And in the 70s, after the Fraser government had settled into its role as the national government, the big debate started about where to put the actual Parliament. The original designers of Canberra considered that it should be on a little hill called Camp Hill, which is really small, on the main axis, but on a little hill. The Fraser government had zero interest in this small hill. About half of that government wanted the long-term Parliament to be down on the lake edge, on the axis, but on the lake edge. And the other half, plus one, wanted it to be on top of Capitol Hill. And that plus one was Malcolm Fraser himself. So he got his way, he was the Prime Minister. So it was finally acknowledged and accepted that on top of this thing called Capitol Hill would be a big building, and it would have some vital elements. And I'll just run through those because they're important, because they affect how our Parliament works in a surprising way. There were to be, this is the initial specification, even before they knew what the shape of the building, it was to have two chambers, for the lower house, for the upper house. It was to have committee rooms, it was to have members' offices, it was to have a library, because this was well before the internet. And the source of knowledge was a hard copy library. It was to have sporting facilities, because most of the members came from somewhere else, and they needed to play
something, tennis or rugby or whatever, in between debates. And it was to have event spaces. And all parliaments have places where you can greet, overseas dignitaries or whatever. So they were the initial round of what it was to contain, and that's pretty conventional for most national parliaments across the world. The two things that are a lot more special for our Parliament House was that it was finally agreed that it would also contain the ministerial wing. So all of the ministerial offices and the Cabinet Office are part of the same building. And that's not all that common. Certainly if you took the Victorian Parliament, the ministerial wing, if you like, is in Treasury Place. And that's where the Cabinet Room is too. So Victoria's Parliament, for let's say 28 weeks a year, is really empty. Nothing happens there because all the bits of activities of government happen in other buildings. And then the final thing that was agreed to be included in this building was the National Press Gallery. And that's near unique. There's very few other parliaments in the world where the press people actually live in the same building. The vast majority of parliaments, you'll see press conferences, you see interviews with prime ministers in other places, but generally it's about the press getting out of their cars, coming to interview a prime minister or a minister at the gate or at the door. In our case, they're actually in the building, they're in there 24/7. So just have that in your mind, both the Min Wing in the Cabinet Office and the Press Gallery makes ours very close to unique. The design of the building was arranged through an international competition, and it was won by, overseen, I might say, by a Melbourne engineer. And his name was Bernard Cullinan. I don't know whether anybody here might have known him. He or his son Nick. His son Nick Cullinan's about our age. So,
I knew him.
You knew
my father's.
Oh, you knew Bernard or Nick?
I knew Bernard.
Yeah. And his nephew, by the way, Tony Cullinan, used to live quite close to here. So Bernard Cullinan was appointed to be the chair of what was called the Parliament House Construction Authority, and his job was to, if you like, organise a competition and get the thing built and make it buildable, because there'd been an awful hangover from the Opera House fiasco. The Opera House was almost impossible to build, it took too long, it was extraordinarily expensive. So Cullinan's job was to find good architects and then let contracts and get it built, on time, on budget. And the international competition was won by a trio, a guy from America, Harold Mitchell, a guy from Australia, Richard Thorpe. Richard Thorpe's an architect about the age of people here now. He was young at the time, this is 1978. He was an up-and-comer from Sydney. And the third, and most important, was a slightly older guy, Aldo Gergolo, Italian architect who happened to be working in the USA. And when they won the comp, Aldo came out and lived in Canberra from there on, from 1980 onwards. And he lived there till he died only a few years ago. So he oversaw the vast majority of the actual build of Parliament House, and we used him as a consultant right through the following years as things unfolded. We'd get advice from him about all sorts of things. It'd be fair to say the design that they came up with was unique. All the others were about building a building on top of Capitol Hill. The design we ended up with, courtesy of Mitchell, Gergolo and Thorpe, was to take the top of Capitol Hill off, build the structure, and then rebuild the grass over the top. And this was all about trying to have a recognition that the Parliament was subservient to the people, and this is before terrorism. It was considered that it should be highly appropriate for Australia's citizenry to be able to walk over the top of Parliament House, not have to look up and worship this remote structure. So that was the design. It was pretty buildable. The only moderately tricky thing were those two big curved walls you can see in that photograph. They're very big, and just getting those built was
tricky. Thereafter, all the rest of it is on a grand scale, but all basically rectangular construction. So all huge amount of concrete within, but it was all mostly very, very buildable. The companies that built it were two names that you might still recall. One was John Holland, a Melbourne company, and the other, also a Melbourne-based company, Lewis Construction, which then became called Concrete Constructions. But they were the two main contractors. And it was finally opened in 1988 by Queen Elizabeth, and that was in the Hawke government era. One amusing thing is there's all sorts of photographs of the grand opening, and one of them, this photographer, a bit mischievous, but it was good on him. He got this wonderful shot of Hawke and Elizabeth and so on, all doing grand things on the stage, and then in the audience, but right in the foreground of this photograph is Lionel Barham. Now, Lionel was he was the Deputy Prime Minister at the time, and Lionel thought it was a good idea to come along to the opening of Parliament House in a brown suit. All the rest of it, it's all very conservative. Here's Lionel in this very obvious brown suit. It's been open since '88, and mostly works quite well. It is fair to say they got the design right, in the sense you walk into it now and you walk around the building and it still all feels new and modern. A lot of buildings that were built in 1988 now look tired and old. The Parliament House Canberra has still got quite a vibe of being clean and neat and monumental, but it has not aged the way an awful lot of other 1988 buildings have. The annual rhythm of the building is interesting. This is where we get into how it works. Sittings of the chambers for about 22 weeks a year. There's another about 6 to 8 weeks when there's a lot of committee work in the building. So for that period, you've got lots of MPs coming and going for the 22 weeks plus the 6 to 8 weeks. The other, say, 24 weeks are non-sitting periods. In Victoria, those non-sitting weeks, the Victorian Parliament is empty. Really, it's just very few people in it. In Canberra, that's not the case because the men wing's there, and they're staffed, certainly the Prime Minister's office, the Minister for Defence's office, and the Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. Those offices are staffed 24/7 because there's things happening overseas all the time, not in our time zone, and you can guarantee right now with all the unfolding stuff around Gaza, all of those offices will be 24/7. And then the other thing that's 24/7 is the press gallery, because the press gallery is not just print journalists, it's radio and it's TV. So you regularly see young big guys carrying a big camera in and out. You'll see all the various radio personalities and TV personalities, the David Spears and so on, coming and going, because that's where their offices are in Canberra. The shape of the offices has changed. The press component has dropped. The print component has dropped off, but the electronic component is big and strong. Okay, now in terms of people, in a non-sitting week, there's about 1,700 people in the building, non-sitting week. In a sitting week, that goes up to about 3,800. Quite a lot of people working in there. And it's a combination of different people. There'll be about 76 senators, 151 MHRs, about 230 politicians. There'll be their advisors and DLOs, probably about 500 of those in the building at any one time. There's the so-called chamber departments who look after the transactions in each place. They're about 200 people each. Then there's the thing I looked after called the Department of Parliamentary Services. That's the tradies who maintain it, the security guards, the catering staff, the IT people, all the garden staff, the Hansard staff who record what's actually happening during debates, project managers, because there's always upgrades happening. for all sorts of reasons, and I'll come back to some of those later, but there's always investment in this building. It cost $1 billion back then. To replace it now would be about $5 billion, roughly. And every year there must be at least $100 million of various upgrades, mostly to do with the security, either physical security or IT security. Hacking is a real big problem now. So that is my one. Then there's the external AFP security. My staff were the internal security, unarmed. The AFP external security in my time all carried a piece, generally a big pistol. These days, with terrorism having gone up even more, you will always see young AFP officers carrying machine guns. It's that serious that they're quite aggressively on a patrol around, because that is the threat now to a place like Parliament House Canberra. The press gallery numbers, about 300 at any one time, about coming and going. There's visitors every day. You get 800,000 visitors a year, so about 2,500 a day. And then finally you get lobbyists. And I couldn't tell you how many lobbyists come and go. There have been various guesses at 500 who come and go. Some of them represent bona fide lobby groups like chambers of manufacturers and so on. Some of them represent individual companies, but they're an ever-present part of Parliament House. Okay. It is a place where you have the normal debates, but it's also a place where you have, I call it high theatre, quite memorable bits of the national, of what's happening in Australia happen in and around the building. Just about 4 from my time. First was the Stolen Generation apology, which Kevin Rudd gave in the Great Hall, and it was quite a very moving event. A bit later that same year was the GFC, the unfolding GFC, and the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Actually, I will say, I think in terms of Kevin Rudd's career, and I think he'd say this himself, the high point of Rudd's career was giving that apology. I think that was Kevin's high point, and it started to go a bit downhill thereafter. But he did that very well on the day. With the GFC and Lehman Brothers collapsing, that was it was a question time day, and it was unfolding news, and it was fascinating to see how much Malcolm Turnbull, who was leader of the opposition, knew about it, and he gave a very eloquent explanation about how the world's banking system hung off these big American banks and how serious this was. And again, I'd say that was Malcolm's high point, well and truly above his prime ministership, which wasn't all that glorious, but that was a moment when he held the attention of everybody in the chamber, because he alone understood how the world's financial institutions worked. He was extremely good. Moving on to other high theatre, mid-2010, Kevin Rudd being deposed within his own party. And that was a memorable day. I was wandering around the corridor, I was just packing up to go home when I realised, there's something happening here. This was late afternoon, and it's getting dark, and there were all sorts of ministers scurrying here and there were meetings happening all around the ministerial wing, and it became very clear that a coup was unfolding within the Labor Party. And the next day there was Rudd acknowledging that he'd lost confidence of his own party, many tears in the ministerial courtyard. That was closely followed by the 2010 election, and then there was another round of high theatre because Gillard, as Prime Minister, didn't quite win the election in her own right. She had to depend on crossbenchers. And there was about a month of uncertainty about which crossbenchers would support Labor or would they support the Liberals. There was this big press conference in one of the rooms when the various key players, principally Bob Catter, Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott, gave their views about whether they're going to support Labor or the Liberals. And Catter was very simple, he did it very quickly. Tony Windsor was quick, he Carter said he'd support Liberals. Tony Windsor said he'd support Labor quickly. And then Rob Oakeshott, independent member from the north coast of New South Wales, took 45 minutes. It's boring as buggery. Finally said, and I'm going to support Labor. So then that gave Gillard the authority to then govern, but it was a pretty shaky, she was a very effective Prime Minister, given that she really had no majority in her own right. She had to govern by cooperation, and she was very effective at that. But it was always unstable because of being so dependent on the Greens and dependent on these independents. And the final big thing in my time were visits to the building by the Queen and a little bit later President Obama. You don't often get either of them, either reigning monarchs or POTUSes come to the building, and both of them were memorable for all sorts of reasons. In the case of the Queen, she was not young by then. We were getting ready for her, and it was both her and Duke were there. I was down at the staff cafe one day while we were getting ready. These two young people just along from me, we're having it's a cafeteria. You hear them say, "Who's the old dear who's coming?" And the one next to us said, "It's Harry's grandma." Different generation, a whole different view of the world. And Obama, of course, he arrived and they did what POTUSes always do, and that is you never ever know quite when they're going to be here or there. Their security guard might tell you that he's going to come in by the front entrance, but in fact they come in from another entrance. This is all about security and keeping the enemy, whoever the enemy are, offside. So at least once he came into the building through the goods loading dock. And this was all about keeping the evil doers at bay. Just bear with me while I turn over a couple of pages. Okay, a bit about the people in the building. No, just before I do that, I'll talk a bit about my time there. I was specifically employed because I was a civil engineer, or because I was an engineer. I didn't need to be a civil engineer. There was a huge backlog of unstarted and unfinished projects around the building. People here will be old enough to remember that back in the 80s, a lot of IT systems ran on DOS. Remember DOS, disk operating system? Well, I can tell you, by 2009, a lot of Parliament House's systems still operated on DOS, which was it faded from the world's view, except in Parliament House. And so we had a big spend just to move our systems into the modern technology out of this 1980s technology. We had a whole heap of physical security upgrades to do. Some of them were driven a bit by the 9/11 thing in New York, but a lot more of them were driven by awful things like the Bali bombings, the London Tube bombings, and the most telling was really the terrorist things that happened in Mumbai about 2005. Young guys with backpacks on, running from here to there and murdering people as they went, not relying on their own fitness, but carrying a lot of ammunition. And just to try and proof your building against that sort of thing meant we had to harden up a lot of the entrances, move from simple boom gates you might see at Northland to allow cars to and fro from the car parks to crash-proof gates, which are big and bulky and each one costing well north of $1 million. And there's 6 car parks, just like that. You just had to put those sort of things in. So that was a lot of my time in the building. And I might say, I guess we had about 60% of it done by the time I retired when I was 66 years old. But there was more happened in the next couple of years as well. In terms of the personal interactions in the building, and this is where it does get really interesting, if you think about all those people coming and going to the building in sitting weeks, they're people who've put their hands up either to be an MP or to be an MP staffer or to be a press gallery person, and they've come from away. They've come from every one of those sitting weeks, they arrive from Melbourne or Sydney or Darwin or wherever, and here they are in Canberra for the next week, and they interact with each other a lot. Now they do work very hard, and they work long hours, and they do take in too much caffeine just to keep them awake. But they also do take in too much alcohol, and essentially, for quite a lot of them, it'd be fair to say they have a Canberra life that's a bit separate from their life back in suburban Melbourne or wherever. So there's an awful lot of personal interactions, which the husband or wife back in Melbourne might not know about, and is a bit surprised about. Most of that's not as confronting as this recent set of controversies around Lehrman and Higgins, but it is a reality that these people, in Canberra for maybe 30 weeks a year, away from home, they have their own life, take on too much booze, so there's all sorts of relationships develop. If you went back in history, I'll just mention one because it's well and truly dead. But for example, and this is early in the life of Canberra, Prime Minister Ben Chifley, he was Labor Prime Minister from 1945 through to 49. Ben, he had a close connection with Phyllis Donnelly. Now, Phyllis was his personal assistant, but it did just happen that Phyllis lived in the next room to Ben in the Currajong Hotel as well. And the press cooperated with that. They never really raised anything about that, but it was a reality that's the way it worked. And Mrs. Chifley, she just lived at home in Bathurst, and she either decided not to say anything, or but that's the way it worked. And you've got it over the years since then. There's a whole lot. I'm not saying it's prime ministers, but there's a whole lot of that sort of stuff that's happening. So you wonder what could go wrong, and quite a lot can. Yeah. Just a bit about the future of Parliament. It's an absolute given that there will have to carry on being more security and more technology in the building. That's just the nature of the world. Various threats keep on materialising, both physical threats and IT security. Even in my time, apart from the physical security upgrades, the IT systems were hacked by a large country to our north, and we had to take really rapid measures to stop that. In the end, for that hack, it wasn't about top secret stuff about rockets or anything like that. What the hack was about politicians' diaries. And you say, so what? Well, diaries are pretty valuable because you can work out who they're meeting, what they might be thinking, and that was the nature of that hack. So there will be more security, there will be more technology, and that'll just keep on going. Another one is about energy security. It's a building with a huge flat roof, and you can see it a bit in those photographs. And we put a trial set of photovoltaic cells on one part. It all seems to work, and my expectation now is there'll be a whole lot of that roof will become covered in photovoltaics. It'll give a lot better security, so I think that's very likely. Will there be more members and senators? There's various pushes, but I'd just say maybe. The little catch about the Australian Parliament is something in the Constitution which says that there needs to be a certain number of senators. You can change that, but if you change that, or if you change the number of MHRs, there's the lower house members, you've got to also increase the number of senators. And the nature of our voting system means that opens the door for more and more minor parties getting into the Senate. And it'd be fair to say both major parties, Labor and Liberal, are not very keen on having more minor parties. So it's not clear to me whether it ever will grow. Aldo Jurgela has mapped out options for growing the number of officers and all of that, and both chambers can easily handle more members, but it's not clear to me that there will actually be an increase in numbers. The US, by the way, basically hasn't changed. It's got 100 senators, 2 for each state, and then it's got 450 roughly members of Congress. And that hasn't changed for only 200 years. The way they manage it is that as the population grows, they allocate more support staff into the offices of each senator and each congressman. So a congressman over in the US might have 25 staff. Here they might have 3, but over there, much bigger electorate, so they have 25. And that might be which way to go. Ministerial staff, there'll definitely be more. That's just goes with the nature of politics. Each time a new government comes in, they always want more support staff. You've seen that in one sense in Victoria. Most recently, Premier Andrews upped the number in his personal office from about 40 up to over 100. And I think that compares with the PMO, the Prime Minister's office only has 50. But I think there'll be a temptation from various politicians to go up and up. Better behaviour amongst them, with all the scandals and so on. Maybe it'll improve. There's a better system for giving somewhere for the support staff to go and complain to if they're badly treated by a minister. But whether that's durable, I don't know. Then the final thing is almost certainly over the next 50 to 100 years, the Commonwealth Government of Australia will get more powers and they'll be hoovered up from state governments. Now what powers they will be, I don't know. Over the last 100 years, the taxing powers of the Commonwealth went back up exponentially. Corporations' powers went up. And they're all driven by disasters, if you like. World War I was the initial reason for taxing powers increasing. World War II, another round. The corporations law powers went to the Commonwealth because it was absurd to have big companies like BHP being regulated by the state of Victoria. It needed a national regulator. So I think those sort of things will happen. But that's where I'm going to end my chat. I hope I haven't babbled on too long. Very happy to take some questions.
Alan, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Just looking at this map here, this photo, this photo here, I've always wondered about the spire, whether that has any functionality at all, or is that just aesthetics?
It's pure aesthetics. It's where the flag flies. Those flags are big. I think they're roughly the size of a double-decker bus. Right. And they go as a climber, and two guys go up with a new flag. They go up the slope and then vertically, and they swap them over. Generally every 2 months. But if there's been a big windstorm, the flag gets ripped and torn, so it might be more often. But it's really it's just symbolic.
Yep.
But it was just part of the original concept of Alto Judo.
Yeah, Alan, is there anybody that still prefers old Parliament House to the new one? People who still, worked in it from that in the current era?
There's nobody. It's a good question because when they did the original design of Parliament House, they didn't quite get it right in terms of support staff, and we ended up with a slightly sad situation where some support staff were still working out. They weren't actually working in old Parliament House, but they were working in a building right next to it, simply because there was no space in the big building except for deep down in basements where people didn't have any daylight. Now we did create some more space, but it'd be fair to say, having done that, I suspect people are happy to be on the hill rather than outposted. It's now, the old building is now called MAD, Museum of Australian Democracy. It's a nice space to go and visit if you're in Canberra, and I suspect that's how it will stay. I'm only guessing though. Yeah. Any other questions?
You raised two functional things, state and federal jurisdiction, but just addressing another point, the role of the ministries and whether their role is being outsourced to private companies, and how does the ministerial role fit in with the design of the building?
Okay, yeah, very good questions, because it has changed over time. Be fair to say it started to change most dramatically in the era of Gough Whitlam, and various other governments since then have accelerated that. So these days, there's if you like, a lot more politics goes into each decision, and less public service goes into each major decision. The public service is still there, trying to give frank and fearless advice, but each of the political offices have grown, and you can actually, if you go into the Min Wing, they were designed to be nice, spacious offices for a minister and maybe 10 staff. Most of the Min Wing offices are now chock-a-block full of people. Typical minister might have 20 or 25 there. The PMO is absolutely full with 50 or thereabouts. And all those people are keeping busy, taking decisions, if you like, in advance of and around whatever advice the public service have given them. So yeah, it'd be fair to say, even now, there's more if you like, decision taking happening by either elected elected politicians and or their staff rather than the public service. And look, that's in one sense that's good because certainly the politicians are more accountable to Australians across the whole country, and some of the public servants are Canberra based and have never lived any other life. And that's, I must say, it's a real problem for Canberra that a significant proportion of the public servants in the Australian public service, they've never lived and experienced the frustrations of living in Western Sydney or Broadmeadows, or you think of living in remote parts of Australia. The perspective they bring to things is that of somebody who can commute to work in 10 minutes and live in a comfortable life in Tuggeranong or wherever. And so to that extent, I think it's healthy. What's not healthy is that some of the decisions are now highly political and tactical and have little regard for the long-term well-being of Australia. Yeah. I don't have a good answer to that.
Okay. Yeah. Alan, you were a reformer in Victoria and obviously a reformer in Canberra in upgrading the technology and increasing security. Any change agent, it sounds simple, but no one wants to change. What's your secret to success?
Well, the most success, you can make change when it's clear there's an external enemy or an external problem. Okay, and so I'll actually jump back into Victorian government. When I became a department head under John Cain and then Joan Kerner. When Jeffrey came to power, at that stage our credit rating was trashed, and so it was costing Victorian government a lot of extra dollars just to borrow money, and every month we were borrowing more and more of it. Now that created an external environment where it became clear that we had to save money, we had to cut costs. Now once that's accepted as that's the imperative, then a whole lot of the things you do from there on become much easier. But if you don't have that external imperative, if people think, take money, you can just keep on borrowing with no consequences, then politicians will do that, and change is almost impossible. In Canberra, with the DPS, where I was for those 4 years, there had been a big problem with my predecessor. She was a lovely person and she was very hard working, but she was painfully shy. And so something I did was just spend a lot of my time walking around the building, talking to people, security guards, gardeners, and so on, just to create a culture where there's more communication and people could feel part of one team. So they're the sort of things you do. And I might say that allowed us to then, we actually had some really good ideas come out of that. Like the gardeners had this really good brainwave about moving away from the really lush green grass that was built into the building originally to go to couch grass. And couch grass, it does go a bit brown in Canberra's winter, but it doesn't die, and importantly, it only uses a bit less than half the water of Kentucky grass. And Canberra has droughts all the time. And so, that came up as a brainwave of the gardeners. So if you can get them, thinking positively, there you go. You've got to change. So, but having that external imperative it's accepted that there is something that's got to change. That then becomes the starting point. Oh, another one, of course. The hack of the IT systems. Up until then, we'd had, and I must say this is especially a feature of Greens members. Greens members recruit staff who think the Parliament House is a wonderful place to run their computer and have all sorts of weird little apps on these computers. And what became clear was that a lot of the viruses that had come in courtesy of these weird apps. Okay? And that imperative allowed the two presiding officers, my role at Parliament House, I wasn't accountable to the ministers, I was accountable to the Speaker and the President of the Senate. And that revelation that these viruses had come in and that all of their personal details had been hacked, once that became clear, then we just pull the drawbridge up straight away. And all apps had to be approved by my IT system, my IT section. And that was a defining moment for the IT operations in the building. Yeah. Any other?
I think you used the term, I think I heard you use the term POTUS around the term of when you mentioned Obama.
Yes.
Is that like a head of state?
That's the language the Yanks use. President of the United States, POTUS, P-O-T-U-S. Yeah. Sorry, but I shouldn't have. It's one of those things that when a president is coming towards the building, you meet these big dudes with bulgy pockets, and part of it will be about IT, and there'll be something in their ear, and there'll be something on their belt, but in there, there's a big weapon, and it's all about. We need this for POTUS, or we need that for POTUS.
Did you meet Obama?
No, I didn't. I was part of the renter crowd.
Yeah.
I had quite a few interactions with both Phil and Elizabeth, but with POTUS, it was just the way it was organised. You've just got to be realistic that sometimes you get the chance and sometimes you don't. With Obama, it was interesting. He and Gillard get on very well personally. They're obviously from a similar political viewpoint, and you can see their interaction, their values were very similar. Yeah. Good. Happy with that.
Okay, any more questions? All right. Alan, thanks very much for your enlightening talk on the history, structure, the actual building, the official opening, and the Canberra culture.
Yeah.
And we also really enjoyed hear about your role in upgrading this technology and increasing security in an environment where change is often hard to bring it about, and you've been successful in that. Bringing it back to your time in Victoria, just to touch on that, the mid to late 90s, massive technological advancements in Victoria too, in the court system, with IT systems, audio-visual technology, especially video conferencing, so instead of being everyone in the court, just opening up the world but via technology, and that certainly all happened under Alan's leadership. So thanks very much, Alan. We really thoroughly enjoyed it, and thanks for your time. This is a small token of our appreciation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick Lecker, sentiments in relation to Alan's presentation. I can tell you firsthand that politicians are not the only scallywags in Canberra. My first trip to Canberra about 30 years ago, I was up there for a conference, and I was staying at a place called Ridges, and had to meet some people for a Chinese meal. Now, if just backtrack a little bit, if you're doing some shopping this afternoon and you need some honey, you could buy either a Capilano brand or you could buy a Manuka brand. And I wasn't sure where I was going, and I said I thought I knew a taxi to this Chinese place, and I jumped in the cab and Mike said, "Where do you want to go to?" And I said, "I need to go to a Chinese cafe restaurant in Manuka." And he had a chuckle to himself and said, "Where?" I said, "Manuka." He said, "Fine." Yeah. He said, "I can take you there." So we drove and we drove and we drove. And we drove. About 20 minutes later, I got to Manuka, and he had a chuckle, and I paid him a $25 fare, where it was, and I got inside, and I said to the people, I was a bit late. I said, "Where you going?" I said, "I just didn't realise that from Ridges to this place here in Manuka was so far away." And I said, "You stay in Ridges?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "That's 400 metres away." I said, "Where'd you say?" Manuka. I said, No, it's Manuka. The taxi driver took full advantage of the fact that I was Mexican in Victoria. I'll leave it on that note. Now, we're going to have a little celebration in a minute, and thank you all for coming today. Those who are going to have a meal downstairs will go in there shortly beforehand.
I'm going to have the meal up here.
We're going to be in here, sorry. There'll be something for our centenarian. Okay, so thanks everybody, and particularly to Peter for your presentation. That was terrific. That was great, and also Alan. It's certainly opened my eyes about the goings on and the building itself, and it's an impressive place. I've been there, and probably a lot of you people have been there as well. But just thinking, listening to Alan's presentation today, I think I might go back and have a look, and go back and have a look at the old place too. Anyway, I won't bore you with that. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you.
Do you want to say something about, because we are having a December meeting now?
Well, we are having a December. Yes, that's right.
What it's going to be about?
Yep. Now I'm trying to remember the date.
12th.
I was going to say the 12th.
Yeah.
Because our combined with the other at Ballara's on the 6th of December.
6th, and we're the week after.
Yeah. But the committee in recent times have, we talked about we're having a meeting, we're going to have one, so we'd like to see everybody there and more. But the focus will be not so much on the normal sort of presentation that we have like today. Really will be a forum. What's the forum? Well, we are inviting the members, committee as well, but particularly the members who are not on the committee, to tell us what your thoughts are about the conduct of what we should be doing in progress. One of the, I guess, elephants in the room, Alan alluded to it, was Port Melbourne's a combined membership, and at some stage or other we may need to address it, whether we should think about whether we should be a mixed club. That's just one thing, but. Going forward, what do you want the committee? What do you want to see us be involved in? What do you want to try and help you engage with through that fun and fellowship and so forth? Obviously, we're not going to have a squash tournament because that's not going to suit what the sort of activities of what we want. Gary's been pretty much challenged trying to organise trips that have fallen away because of lack of participation. So if there's things that you want to be involved in, you want the committee to concentrate on, the activities person to be looking at, well, tell us what you want to do, whether it's a trip to the goldfields or a trip out the Yarra Valley or that sort of activity. David, anything else that you can think of in terms of?
No, I think that's it. We just want to try and get feedback from the members in terms of where the club's at, where we're going, and how we can make it better.
Yeah, if you all heard that, but how we can make it better.
It'll also be Gary will put on a bit of Christmas cheer
with
a few decorations and some turkey, etc., etc.
Yep.
We've organised that, it's all organised.
It's all organised, so...
Just one other thing.
We'd love a big roll-up, it'd be great.
John?
Yes.
Would you mention to the members, the ones that are going to the Rosanna and Christmas turnout,
Yep.
please wear your name badges.
Yep. Not sure if everybody heard that, but for those who are going to the combined
Christmas lunch at Ballara, please wear your name badges. Me included. Mine's in my bag, I know.
Yeah, it's just so that people that are there, you probably meet people you haven't met before, and it's nice to know their names. And they've suggested that we all wear our name badges.
That's true. Makes it a whole lot easier.
Yeah. If the women haven't got it, don't matter. They'll have tags to put on the women that are going anyway.
Okay, Robert.
If anyone needs a name badge and doesn't have one, talk to me later about it.
Yep, okay.
If anyone needs a name badge, please speak to Robert about it. Okay. Anything else? Yes. So. Okay, that's it. All right. Thank you.
Dinner should be up shortly.
Dinner should be up shortly.
Yeah, and we'll have our celebrations.
And Colin, thanks very much for. A special round of applause for Colin.
Half around applause. It only half work. That's all right. We'll work on it.
It's a work in progress. So I think the sort of thing, if you get an 80% right, you can just go from there.
That's a good system.
Well done, Colin.
All right.
Okay.
It's going to work. Thank you.